As we read from Mark, the 5th chapter now, the story you just heard was the very end of chapter 4. Jesus starts on one side of the sea and now travels to the other side, which is something that Jews shouldn't do. They shouldn't go to the other side, because to go to the other side is to go to the place where, well, those other people live and those people who worship those other gods. And to go to that land at all would be to make yourself unclean, would be to ruin your own relationship with God. So just the fact that Jesus wants to head across to the other side is kind of a big deal. And then in this story, well, Jesus does a lot of things that would have terrified any Jewish folks who were listening to the story. He encounters a man who's wrestling with some demons, which to encounter that kind of a person, again, might ruin your own relationship with God. And then it says that they are in this place that the crypts where they bury their dead, which again is a place that would make you unclean. And again, some pigs show up in the story, which really would have terrified people. So definitely a place where Jesus should not be. This is a story that's meant to terrify the Jewish community. And I'll say a little bit more afterwards. So here is the story after Jesus gets to the other side. They traveled across the sea to the land of Gerasa in Galilee. When Jesus came ashore there, he was immediately met by a man who was tortured by an evil spirit. This man lived in the cemeteries, and no one could control him, not even those who tried to tie him up or chain him up. He had often been bound in chains, but its strength was so great that he could break the chains and tear the irons loose from his feet and hands. No one and nothing could subdue him. Day and night he lurked among the tombs or ran mad in the hills, and the darkness made him scream or cut himself with sharp-edged stones. When this man saw Jesus coming in the distance, he ran to him, fell to his knees in front of him, and Jesus started commanding the unclean spirit, "Come out of that man, you wicked spirit." Shouting, the unclean spirit said back, "What's all this about, Jesus, Son of the Most High? In the name of God, I beg you, don't torture me." "What is your name?" "They call me Legion, for there are thousands of us in this body." And then Legion begged Jesus again to leave them alone. Do not send them out of the country. And since the Gerasenes were not Jews who considered pigs to be unclean, there happened to be a large herd swine, some 2,000 of them, feeding on the hill nearby. "Send us into those pigs, if you have to, so that we may enter into them." Jesus granted the request. The darkness swept up out of the man and into the herd of pigs, and then they thundered down the hill into the water, and there they drowned, all 2,000 of them. The swineherds ran away, telling everybody they met what had happened. Eventually, a crowd of people came to see for themselves. When they reached Jesus, they found the man, Legion, had afflicted, sitting quietly, sane, fully clothed. When they saw this, they were overwhelmed with fear and wonder. Those who had witnessed everything told the others what had happened, how Jesus had healed the man, how the pigs had rushed into the sea, and how they had destroyed themselves. When they had heard the whole story, the Gerasenes turned to Jesus and begged him to go away. When Jesus climbed back into the boat, the cured demoniac asked if he could come and be with Jesus. But Jesus said, "No, stay here. I want you to go back to your own people and let them see what the Lord has done, how he has had mercy on you." So the man went away and began telling this news in the 10 cities region. Wherever he went, people were amazed by what he told them. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. So this is a reading that generally makes Lutherans really uncomfortable. Oh, demons, bad spirits, and then the whole thing with the pigs, what's that about? I mean, no wonder these people wanted to run Jesus out of town. He just destroyed their entire economy. This guy shows up from across the sea, kills all their pigs, and We're like, well, please, if that's the kind of healing you bring, we don't want it. We don't want it. So they kick him out of town. But there's a lot going on here. And it's also tied to the story I shared previously with the help of the kids, that this is an example of God displaying God's power in the world and where God can show God's power in the world. So the sea was also thought to be kind of an evil thing. The ocean was terrifying. These storms could come up and just swallow people up. Sometimes people went out in their boats and they were never seen again, and there was stuff swimming in that water that they didn't know, they didn't understand. So the sea, it's not something you mess around with. And so for Jesus to stand up and say, "Peace, be still," like our little Jesus so beautifully said, was amazing. Wait a minute. God can even have some sort of control over the sea? That was a big thing. But then now here we have this image of God showing up across the sea where, well, God shouldn't go, and then communicating, talking with a demon, an unclean person in the midst of death. Definitely something a person of God shouldn't do. And even around pigs, there's no way God can show up in that kind of a place. No way. And here, God again shows up in the midst of that place and displays amazing power to liberate, to set free this person from legion of demons. And that is a loaded thing too, right? Because legion has to do with the Roman Empire, and people would have put that together in the minds right away that maybe perhaps God even has control over the Roman Empire? Whoa. That's intense. These people who have occupied us, taken us over, and brought with them a huge army. God can even display some power there. God can show up even there. Where then can God not have power and strength? And I don't know if you guys saw the video I made this week, but I was really wrestling with these demons. What is this about? And do we still wrestle with demons? I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I love watching the show Supernatural. I don't think that's real, that real people are getting possessed and taken over. I'm not so sure. But I do know that people wrestle with demons. There are real demons that people wrestle with. There are demons of addiction, and those things really do take over people's lives. And you'd lose control of yourself, and it causes harm to yourself and to your family and to your friends and to the people around you. And it really does cause you to be isolated away from your family and from your community, and you end up alone and hurting yourself. There are the demons of mental health. That, again, you have no power over, can take over you, and you have no control over how you feel, whether you feel happy this day or sad this day, or like you want to get out of bed that day even or not, or whether you even want to open up the window to see the sun. Sometimes it controls you beyond your own capacity to get out of it. And then there are some even bigger demons out there, demons of racism that keep people down, that keep people cornered away in certain parts of society. And I have felt powerless against that demon at least a couple of times throughout my life, where I have been held down or kept away or prevented from doing things because of that demon of racism in this society. I know women in this room have felt that demon of sexism, and have felt some kind of abuse in their life, most likely. You have felt that. There are a lot of demons that we wrestle with, and so when Legion is the name of these demons, I also think it's a lifting up of there's a lot of different types of demons that we wrestle with, and guess what? God can show up in the midst of all of those. That there is none of those, that God is not willing to come close, that even in the midst of whatever it is that you're wrestling with, God can and does show up in whatever darkness you are in. But sometimes it requires us to run, to run to Jesus and to fall on our knees and to try and be brought together with our community, because as long as you stay alone and you stay disconnected and you stay far away, oh man, that's where that demon can have control. And so there's a call for us to be reunited to our friends, to our families, to our communities. And then maybe there's even a call for us as church, as the hands and feet of Christ in the world, to run to those places, to go across the sea to a place where we maybe think we shouldn't go, and say, you know what, God is here too. That you don't have to be alone. You don't have to fight this demon by yourself, but here's a group of people who are willing to say, God can show up here too. I just got an interesting proposal from Tom Hall this morning. He said, hey, do you want to go with me to the prison? And I said, yes, let's go there. That's one of those places where people often say, you shouldn't go there. That's where the bad people are. You might catch it, right? It might rub off on you. But that's one of the places where we can go and say, you know what? God can be here too. God can be here too. And that's our role as church, as community, as people who have said yes to this commitment in the waters of baptism. That as God chose us, and as God said, I will be with you forever, then we also make a commitment back to say, all right, God, you showed up for me, now I'll show up for you. Because God has a mission in the world to do the work of restoration and reconciliation in the world, and God took a big risk to pick us to do that work. God chose you to do that work, to demonstrate God's love, God's peace, God's healing, God's justice in the world, and we can do that. And yet, sometimes we lose that battle to those demons. And so we also just need a place to grieve, because we've lost people too. Sometimes people lose their battle with those demons. Sometimes mental health is not something that can just easily be healed. And we also need a place just to kind of be angry at God every once in a while. And that's okay too. That it doesn't always end in a happy ending like this story did, but sometimes there are sad endings, and yet even in the midst of those sad endings, God shows up too. That sometimes when we lose people to mental health or to addiction or to any one of the legion of demons, we can say, but God can show up, and God does show up, and God can give new life, even after what we think is possible. And so we continue to have hope. We continue to show up. We continue to show up for one another and for the sake of all those. Well, we're all wrestling with demons, some more particular than others, but we continue to make a promise in and through these waters to say, you know what, God's going to show up. God's going to be here, and maybe, just maybe, God will use me by the words I say to somebody, maybe just by sitting with somebody, maybe just by staying on the phone with somebody, maybe just by extending a word of gratitude to somebody. You never know. You might be able to at least shed a little bit of light into someone's darkness. So may God use you and me in the struggle against a legion of demons that are out there. Amen.